The Armenian Genocide by Melissa Coulson and Hasmig Chilingirian. Taking a Stand in History, C&C Production. The Murder of a Nation.
They were given only scraps of food. If they fell sick, they were left to die. The Turkish oppressors stopping only to rob their possessions and clothes. Here and there, squads of 50 or 100 men would be taken, bound together, and shot. A common practice was to place the prisoner in a room with 2 Turks stationed at each side. One would hold the prisoner and the other would shoot. The most painful was when they would pull out the prisoner's eyebrows and beard, almost hair by hair. They would extract his fingernails and toenails. These cruelties and many others were usually inflicted at night. The Turks would be stationed around the prisoners, beating drums and blowing whistles, so that the screams of the sufferers could not reach the village. This was the Turkish stand against the Armenian race.
Who were the Turks? The Turks were nomads who around the beginning of the 900s conquered many lands. By the 1300s, these lands became known as the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was so vast and powerful that it stretched from Asia to Spain. The Ottoman Empire reached its height during the 1500s under the reign of Sultan Bayezid II, who ruled from 1481 to 1512.
During these years, the Armenians became part of the vigorous Ottoman Empire. Even though the Armenians were Christians on Muslim territory, discrimination was light. When the Ottoman Empire declined, the Armenians became scapegoats.
The European powers feared the Turks would overpower them. Therefore, Europe had to defend themselves. In 1774, the Turks lost a 6-year war against Russia. By the 1700s, the Ottoman Empire was very weak. As the Ottoman Empire was very weak and began to lose territory around the 1800s, the Greeks and other small people under the Ottoman rule began to get independence from it with the help of the major European powers.
As more and more countries like Bulgaria and Romania broke away from the Ottoman Empire, Turks began losing more lands, such as the Balkan territories. The Armenians were in an especially bad position. During the Ottomans' weak position, the leader was Sultan Abdul Hamid.
Mustafa Kemal was one of the Ottoman officials fearing further collapse of the already declining empire. He reacted harshly. As the Armenians became more intellectually knowledgeable and the Turks became less powerful, they began to fear that the Armenians would take over and try to get their ancestral lands back.
Abdul Hamid believed the only way to solve the Armenian problem was to get rid of the Armenian race. The Armenians, encouraged by the Russians, began promoting Armenian territorial autonomy. At the same time, Sultan Abdul Hamid aroused resentment against the Armenians among the Turks. The result was the persecution of 1.5 million Armenians.
Therefore, in order to protect our country and our religion against the possibility of such a danger, the government, which represents the Islam and Turkish people, intending to forestall a presentation of the Armenian question, has decided to end that question once and for all by deporting the Armenians to the deserts of Arabia.
This letter marks the beginning of the Turks' long-cherished plan of a Turkified Muslim state. The Turks wanted to enforce immigration and segregation of its Christian peoples. This could not work with Europe at peace. Turkey, already partially dismembered by the loss of its Balkan territories and threatened with extinction if it lost the war, as seemed only a matter of days in February and March 1915, sought an outlet for its fears and frustrations. Its Armenian population perfectly suited its need for a scapegoat.
In the 1890s, Abdul Hamid's first step was to organize pogroms against the Armenians. More than 15,000 Armenians were killed during the start of these persecutions. Turkish officials claimed these were necessary for self-defense.
Now that all obstacles have been removed and the time has come to save our country from that dangerous element, we urgently recommend that you not be influenced by compassion because of their miserable plight, and by putting an end to them all, do your very best to obliterate the Armenian name from Turkey.
In May, June, and July 1915, 1,200,000 Armenians disappeared once and for all from their villages. The villages which were once the center of historical Armenia.
Deportations orders were announced. Armenians were given only a few days to leave their homes. Male members of the population who had escaped arrest until then were taken from their wives and shot. Finally, the women, children, and old people were deported in several convoys.
Armenian homes were cleared out by the police. The deportees left on foot, pulling carts behind them, with the bare minimum of luggage. Some were wiped out immediately.
The sick deportees were put out of their misery. They walked hundreds of miles. They were starving, unrecognizable, ragged, and emaciated. In May, the Armenians of kindness were massacred by the Kurds, and south of Erzurum, 30 villages were destroyed.
Deportees were arrested and deported out of Erzurum on June 9th. The Turks did not bury the Armenians they killed. Instead, they threw them down the Euphrates River. This was not deportation, but extermination.
Turkey knew if they took sides with Russia, the Armenian nationalism would get stronger. If this happened, Turkey would be obstructed by Armenian progress. During World War I, the major European powers were so busy with the war that Turkey used this time to massacre the Armenians.
Neighboring countries didn't know about the genocide, so there was no interruption to the Turkish persecutions. In January and February of 1914, the American embassy began hearing horrifying details of the Armenians being persecuted. The Turkish officials denied this from happening. They claimed it was a mere uprising and had it under control. It was Turkish intention to let the world hear of the Armenian massacre only after it had happened. After the Turks hoped to exterminate the Armenians, they knew they'd feel secure in the domination of their country, which had belonged to the Armenians for over 3,000 years.
This had a great impact on the Armenian community, the reduction of Armenian population by 1/10. By 1923, under successor governments, the job had been more or less done.
Police station. Other Armenians were gathered there, tied arm to arm. They took them to the valley. We heard the sounds of rifles. After some days, my mother and brother took a shovel and went down to the valley. They found my father. They dug a hole and buried him. After about a month, I saw my brother bringing something wrapped in a handkerchief. I asked, "Brother, what do you have there? I want to know what that is." He replied, "You don't need to know." But I insisted, "No, I want to know what it is." So he said, "It's Father's head. The dogs have eaten his body. I am going to bury his head in the backyard."
Armenia was given as a mandate to Russia. This forced the Armenians to be ruled under a communist government. In 1992, Armenia was recognized as an independent nation. This genocide, being the first of the 20th century, was not the last. Hitler saw this as a genocide unpunished and said,
After all, who remembers today the extermination of the Armenians?